the use of tov in the introduction of the whole garden setting is the idea that the fruit is tov l'ma'achal, like it's good to eat. And that kind of good, you feel very much like you're the judge of it. Like, just let me try it and I'll decide if it's good to eat. And Ra also elsewhere in Tanakh gets used that way, like with these te'enim ra'im that Yirmiyahu talks about in some, mashal that he's giving about um, using figs as like as a metaphor for something. I believe it's figs. That if fruit is bitter and rotten, then it's ra, and if it's tasty and nourishing, then it's tov. And so it is about the idea of you, through your sort of sensory experience, can decide what's good for you and what isn't, and that if everyone does that, then we'll work out, the ways of doing things, and we'll be able to, in a sense, derive all the more complicated notions of right and wrong from just some kind of following our nose. Like, of course, we don't want bad things to happen, so we've realized that, like, to prevent bad things from happening, no one should murder anyone, for example, because and there are people who try to make those kinds of arguments for moral theories, that in a sense, anything that's actually immoral or moral, you should be able to appreciate that from some kind of very basic principles of everyone should understand why this is bad for them or why this is good for them. And clearly the Torah does not present itself that way. The Torah says, look, there are things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands about the way the world works, because he made the world and he sees from the beginning of time to the end, that you're not going to be able to understand by seeing how it feels, or if anything ra or anything bad seems to be happening right now in the instant that something happens or something gets done. And so your short-sighted and maybe more sort of primitive sensory judgments, or even more primitive, just does anyone at the moment seem to be unhappy about what's going on kind of judgments, those will not stand you in good stead in the long term. And I actually think another aspect of what's making that point in the Torah is the nachash, because the nachash is this animal, this pasuk, again going back to like hu yeshuv charosh ve'atat shufeno akev, right? That he will strike at your head and you will strike at his heel. That we don't like the snake biting us, so we strike at the snake's head because that's where the fangs are. And so we see the end of some development of events coming at us, and we say, all right, I want to stop that bad thing that I don't like. But the snake is this whole long, winding, wiggly process that really starts with the tail and goes to the head. And we have a very poor ability to understand what we're setting in motion when we do things and what that's going to look like down the line. So it's, again, this idea of the snake ultimately that jumps up and bites you because of the chatayim, right? The things that you're doing that are wrong in Hashem's eyes. You may not yourself be able to necessarily appreciate like how the problem arises from the misdeed. And so trying to reason yourself about like what is permitted or forbidden because you're just trying to avoid bad things in the future is really going to send you to a calamity. But what the Torah is trying to do is, Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying, look, trust in me, and I have some things I can share with you that will guide you away from these mistakes that are not obvious mistakes. Like, you can't, focusing on the act itself, necessarily always appreciate, like, what is so wrong with this? Tell me what the problem is. It doesn't seem to cause harm to anyone or whatever, so why could it be wrong? There's all sorts of stuff in the Torah where it enjoins upon us obligations and restrictions and commitments, things we have to do or things we're not allowed to do, where it's not clear all the downstream consequences of observing those laws, what they'll be. And in the same way that you don't have an easy time telling where the head of the snake is going to strike by just being told sort of where the tail is and how it's seeming to coil from its beginning.